Hello and welcome. We are here today to talk about the warning signs for violence, strategies for being an upstander, and Boulder Valley School District's multi-dimensional approach to school safety. This project is part of a collaboration between the University of Colorado Boulder's Center for the Study and Prevention of Violence, the Boulder Valley School District's safety programs, and the Colorado Shakespeare Festival. And I'm thrilled to be presenting with Carissa Jaquish from the Boulder Valley School District and the Colorado Shakespeare Festival's Amanda Giguere. The Center for the Study and Prevention of Violence has been doing violence prevention work for more than 30 years in the state of Colorado, delivering programs in K-12 settings, in communities and in universities to try to address the warning signs for violence and the strategies that we can use to address those signs, get people support, and prevent attacks from happening in our schools and communities. Our presentation tonight is hoping to enlist the help of community members in this work. And we're going to have three parts to this presentation. But before we jump in, we want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Some of the material we'll be talking about is a little bit difficult, sometimes hard to hear, and we want you to take care for yourself if anything should become upsetting. Hit the pause button, get a drink of water, take a walk, and hopefully come back and join us. Our presentation has three parts. We're going to talk about the rates of violence in the United States, Boulder Valley School District's multi-dimensional approach to school safety, as well as the importance of and strategies for being an upstander in our community so that we can prevent attacks from happening. We know when we look at the statistics for firearm violence in the United States that they are certainly concerning. When we look at the rates of firearm violence-related deaths that happened between 2018 and 2021 in the United States, those deaths increased by approximately 1,000 deaths per year over that time period, from almost 15,000 in 2018 to more than 20,000 in the year 2021. We also know that the number of mass shootings from firearms have increased in that same time period, almost doubling from 2018 to 2021, from 336 in the year 2018 to 692 in 2021. And these are certainly concerning statistics. We also know that the number of mass shootings and fatalities related to mass shootings have increased in Colorado for the same time period. And when we're using the phrase mass shooting, we're talking about an event where 4 or more people were attacked, injured, or killed in that incident. So it's injuries and deaths related to the shooting event. In Colorado, we know that the number of mass shootings have increased from approximately 2 in 2017 to 13 in the year 2022. The number of injuries related to those mass shooting events have also increased from approximately 7 in 2017 to 59 in 2022, and the fatalities have also steadily increased over that time period. When we look at firearm-related deaths and violence in Boulder County, the statistics are not as alarming, but still incredibly concerning. When we look at this particular chart, we see that in the year 2021, there were 10 fatalities related to a mass shooting event in the county, and that was related to the attack at King Soopers in Boulder. While these statistics are incredibly concerning, we also have a tremendous amount of research that tells us that there are warning signs for these kinds of violent events in our community. In a study done by the United States Secret Service and the Department of Education that was released in 2004, researchers looked at 37 different school attacks that happened between 1974 and 2000. What we learned from this groundbreaking study has really laid a foundation for violence prevention in schools and communities, and it's allowed us to think about what are the steps we, as a school district, as a community, as residents in this community, might take to try to reduce violence in our communities. What we learned from this really groundbreaking study is that in 51% of the cases, the attacker engaged in observable planning behaviors, which means that they were amassing weapons, compiling tactical gear and ammunition in preparation to perpetrate an attack. 81% of the attackers had communicated their plan to perpetrate an attack to a friend, a peer, a parent, or another relative. What these communications allow us to recognize is that it's an opportunity for us to see that communication coming forward, and sometimes it's on social media, and then report it so that services and assistance can be provided. In 93% of these cases, the attacker had engaged in behavior that gave others serious concern. Now, while this is troubling information, that there's observable planning behavior, there's communication to cause an attack, and there are concerning behaviors being exhibited, these are also opportunities for us to intervene. If we know what these warning signs look like, we can actually take steps to address them and provide supportive assistance where needed. When we look at the research from the Secret Service and the Department of Education, they have identified 11 or 12 concerning behaviors that help us think about what this kind of behavior looks like in the weeks and months leading up to these kinds of attacks. And that's a really important thing to recognize. While these attacks oftentimes seem like they have come out of nowhere, they've actually been carefully planned over weeks, months, and in some cases years. That planning means that they're not random, they are not impulsive. The planning means that we have time to see the signs and intervene to address them. The concerning behaviors and risk factors that the U.S. Secret Service and Department of Education have identified include the following: intense or escalating anger that does not fit the scale of the situation, that may make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. An unusual interest in weapons, beyond what we would think of as appropriate for an interest in hunting, law enforcement, or perhaps joining the military. Threats or an intent to attack. Sometimes these threats are communicated directly, such as "I'm going to kill you," or they're communicated indirectly. "You should watch out. It's not going to be safe at school tomorrow." An interest in or history of violence. And in a recent study done by the Secret Service, researchers found that there is frequently an overlap in offending behavior across people who perpetrate mass shootings and people who perpetrate intimate partner violence. The talk of being bullied, and this particular concerning behavior is really important to understand, because it's not just that the individual has actually been bullied, but it's that they perceive that they have been picked on, persecuted, or bullied, and that may fuel a grievance that may lead them want to cause harm to others. Lack of having a trusted adult that the person can rely on or count on or talk to. An unmanaged depression or isolation. Changes in behavior or appearance that are rather dramatic and not fitting with the person's normal manner of conducting themselves. Relationship difficulties, and these relationship difficulties can happen in friendship groups, in intimate partner relationships, and also sometimes with family and friends. Grade or attendance issues and unemployment, a harassment of others, and suicidal ideation or self-harm. Now, what the Secret Service and others have noted is that it's not just one of these concerning behaviors that would cause us alarm. Certainly if any of them are appearing in a friend or a child or a student, we want to pay attention to it. we want to intervene as early as possible to try to get them the support that they need. But what we also know is that it's typically 5 or more of these concerning behaviors that are arising in the individual who's on a pathway toward violence. Now, at the Center for the Study and Prevention of Violence, we recognize that this list of concerning behaviors may be difficult to remember. We believe that the first 3 in this list that you see highlighted in orange here are the concerning behaviors that we want to attend to most closely: intense or escalating anger, an unusual interest in weapons, and threats and/or an intent to attack. Now, these concerning behaviors, we're hoping with presentations like this, we can educate the public, educate our school community about what these concerning behaviors and risk factors look like, and that may help people become upstanders in our community, to see those signs and step forward to address them. But we know that this is difficult work. In post-attack investigations, we frequently learn that people noticed something was wrong with the perpetrator, but they didn't notice that those issues were incredibly serious or indications that the person was on a pathway toward violence. We're hoping that we can educate our communities better on what those warning signs look like and the steps they should take to try to address them. An upstander is someone who takes action when they see or notice someone engaging in concerning or threatening behavior. That instead of seeing that behavior unfold and thinking, oh, I'm not sure that that's actually anything serious, or it's not my place to step forward, we actually need people to recognize that it is their job to step forward. It is their job to worry about that person's behavior and their community's safety. But there's not just one way to be a good upstander. There's actually many different ways we can be upstanders in our community to promote safety and security for everyone. An author named Kim Scott has talked about these different types of upstander interventions, and what we're hoping you will appreciate by learning about these different strategies is that there's not just one way you can step forward. There's many ways you can step forward and get someone help. There is the direct approach, where you as the upstander confront the perpetrator in the moment. You see something unfolding and you say, I'm worried about that. Can we talk about that? What's going on here? A second strategy is to distract the person from the situation. Ask a question, change the topic, or bring somebody else into the conversation to try to distract the direction of that particular concerning conversation. You can delegate. You can delegate your concerns to someone else in authority, law enforcement, a school official, a parent, or someone else who you trust can provide an intervention to help the person who's engaging in the concerning behavior. You can also delay your intervention by pausing in the moment, thinking carefully about whether or not this situation calls for an intervention, and then checking back in with the person who you believe may have been harmed or is engaging in harmful behavior to ask them, is everything okay? What's going on here? And the last upstander intervention that Kim Scott talks about in her 5Ds framework is document. We can always take documenting as an approach to an upstander intervention by sending an email, submitting a report, taking notes in our computer or in our notebooks about what you're seeing unfold, so that you're starting to keep track of the patterns that you're seeing emerge in the person of concern. Those notes may be incredibly helpful later, because we do know that one of the challenges sometimes in these cases is that people are not documenting their concerns. And that lack of documentation means it can be very difficult to connect the dots of concerning behavior over time and over situation so that you can start to see a pattern in the individual's behavior. Those documentation efforts are incredibly helpful for starting to see whether or not there's an escalation in the person's concerning behaviors. I'm going to hand it over now to Carissa.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for the introduction. I am excited to be presenting to you today BVSD's multi-dimensional tool to school safety. We do not believe that there is one factor that will solve all safety responsibilities, and we recognize that a safe learning environment involves various interconnected factors. This comprehensive approach allows us to focus on preventing, mitigating, and responding to safety concerns more effectively. In Boulder Valley, we often say our people are our strength. And so I would like to start with our first, what I call rung or portion of our wheel, which is our security personnel. We have over 50 security personnel that focus on training our staff that are equipped to deal with crisis situations. They're a visible presence and deterrence of crime on our campus. They respond to emergencies, but most importantly, as Sarah alluded to, they develop that trusted relationship with our students, to be that trusted adult, to contribute to that positive school culture. We know that when students feel that they belong, that they are heard, and that they're connected to their communities, that we decrease acts of violence, whether that be bullying, sex-based harassment, or targeted acts of violence. Positive school cultures is one of the main contributing factors to helping students learn and thrive and reach their full potential. Our emergency plans, our next rung, establishes these comprehensive plans in preparation and response to an all-hazard incident, whether that be a wildfire or a flood or a hazardous materials incident, a chemistry department not having proper things. These plans are all-encompassing, but we don't make these plans in a silo. We vet these plans with our community partners, such as the Office of Disaster Management, our first responding partners, Boulder County Public Health, City and County of Broomfield Emergency Management, and the Center for People with Disabilities. These plans are then tested and trained with our staff through standard response protocols developed by the I Love You Guys Foundation. We conduct tabletop exercises with our staff on scenario-based incidents to make sure that our plans are viable and they're capable of being enacted. And then we also train with our first responding partners to make sure that we're speaking the same language, that we have an understanding of how response will occur and how we can ensure that our students and our parents are safe and joined back together. Our security and hardware and software go hand in hand, and they provide tangible measures to prevent and respond to physical security threats. Our hardware includes our surveillance cameras, our visitor management systems. If you ever go to our school, you often have to check in with your driver's license. Alarms, security laminate in our vestibules, and real-time monitoring of our school environments. Our intercoms, which enable us to advise our staff and students if something is going on and those proper actions to take. Our systems and processes represent such things as our board policies, statutory obligations, and mandatory reporting in Colorado. It also involves our threat management protocols, which are adopted by the Colorado School Safety Resource Center. And at the core of our threat review process is the main priority that our assessments do not enact discipline or determine discipline, but rather collaboratively an understanding of those wraparound services to best support those students who are having those concerning behaviors, as Sarah addressed, and how do we prevent them to either mitigate or stop them from happening. Lastly, our community partners foster this collaborative sense of responsibility and access to diverse resources and experiences and expertise, We are able to gain valuable insights into local safety concerns, emerging trends, and community-specific challenges. We have many partnerships across the city and county of Broomfield and Boulder that help us provide these services to our staff and students when they are experiencing pain or trauma or needing supports and connectiveness. This next slide is not an exhaustive list, but highlights some of the community partners which help us provide these wraparound services. They are Out Boulder, which provides connection and advocacy for our LGBTQ+ communities. The 988 Lifeline, which provides 24/7 free and confidential support to people in distress and crisis. our Anti-Defamation League to combat anti-Semitism, cyber hate, and equal rights for all, and our city and county agencies that have embedded mental health advocates and professionals to assist with individuals in crisis. We know that these incidents can be very concerning, and so we want to make sure that we are providing information to our community members, to our parents, to our guardians when these incidents occur. And we want to ensure that not only are we providing that information, but we're providing accurate information when these incidents occur to mitigate the continued impact on our community. Therefore, sometimes it may take a little bit of time to share that information depending on the incident being managed. We also, in Boulder Valley, need to ensure that when we're sharing information, it's in accordance with our HIPAA and FERPA requirements. And our first responding partners often may take a lead in this when sharing information to ensure that we're not impeding on any investigations. Please make sure that when these incidents happen, that your information is updated in Infinite Campus. There is a link here on our slide that you can go to, as well as a text message you can send to get that information. Our communications department has also instituted a new site. So when we have these emergency incidents, you can go to them and see a running blog of everything that is occurring. Lastly, please follow the social media sites for your first responding agencies, as they may be sharing more up-to-date information due to their investigation. In Boulder Valley, we focus on the use of Safe2Tell, which is a statewide recognized application tool for anonymous reporting. Although we emphasize the use of Safe2Tell, there are many ways to report something concerning, either through a trusted adult, through anonymous boxes that are located in most of our secondary and high school schools. But the use of Safe2Tell allows us to ensure that information that may be challenging to say in person is presented, and that way we can get those services to that student. In Boulder Valley School District, we have student ambassadors at some of our high schools who provide education, not just to our students, but to our staff around the use of Safe2Tell. We are very fortunate in our school district, but also in our community, to have this ability of anonymous reporting. We often do education for our students, but we want our community members to know that this is not just an application or a reporting tool for students. It can be used in the community for concerning behavior. Last year, Safe2Tell had a total reports of over 19,000 reports. Those were mostly concerning suicide, bullying, and welfare checks. Here in Boulder Valley, our numbers are very similar, where our focus is mostly on bullying reports and on welfare checks for our students, which is a wonderful thing because we're seeing those concerning behaviors being addressed on the forefront and the ability to provide those wraparound services at the beginning of those concerning stages. We have also seen, which is wonderful, a 77% increase in Safe2Tell reports from last year in our school district, letting us know that the education that we are providing not only to our community, but to our students has provided an opportunity for them to report. We often hear from our community members the desire around education for what happens after a report is made. And so we want to provide that opportunity for discussion and education around that topic. What we first focus on is the ability for somebody to be an upstander and use the 5 Ds and specifically the D of documentation to provide that Safe2Tell report. When that report comes in through Safe2Tell, it is sent to our school district as well as the law enforcement agency who serves that school. We triage that Safe2Tell report with the focus on our school district of first and foremost providing those supports to the student that are immediately necessary, whether that be mental health services, a counselor, and then we say, okay, now that we have provided these wraparound services for the student, what is next to ensure that this concerning behavior is mitigated or prevented? And are there any other impacted students or individuals that we need to be aware of? Law enforcement in turn will do their own investigation to determine if anything is criminal or if there's anything further that they need to do on their side. We then will come together at times, depending on the nature of the report, to say how are we providing services collectively to this family, to this community, to this student, to ensure that we have a positive resolution for this report. Sarah focused in one of her slides on the 5 Ds for upstander reporting, and when you choose to be an upstander, I want to focus on the 4 W's framework for what it means on how to report and what should you report. We often talk about the when, who, where, and what. And what we often find is when we are receiving these Safe to Tell reports or any anonymous report, there are often sometimes missing links about what is happening. And so we want you as an upstander to be aware of the things that we are looking for to provide the best supports for that student or individual. It is who is involved, not maybe just the impacted person, but other people who may be a witness to this, who may inadvertently be impacted by this incident. It is when did this occur? The more specifics of this happened last year, or this happened last month, or this happened yesterday, allows us to understand that the trajectory of the impact that has happened, and then whether and what supports we can provide based off of how long somebody has been dealing with this. Have they been dealing with this for an extended amount of time, or did this just happen? Where did it occur? This often is very important for us to partner with our law enforcement agencies to figure out what services are in that area or what things need to be provided based off the location of the incident, and then an explanation in detail of what actually happened. We often find by providing that detailed information, we're able to provide those additional services. The next slide shows an example of a Safe to Tell report that we typically kind of see, and some missing links that are often there, and then a Safe to Tell report that we received where those helpful links are really there and provide those additional supports for those students involved. The first one explains that sexting is happening. It's a person named Sky on Snapchat, and this just over the past 2 months. So we don't really know who is he sending this to or she sending this to, who is the ex, who is the party involved that is impacted as well. And then on the right, it shows the helpful links that are there. So Sky is mad at Claire because she broke up with him. So he is sending the new photos he has of her when they were dating. It gives a specific individual, Sky Marlowe in grade 10 and Claire Witt in grade 9, as well as the handle for the Snapchat. And when was the first time you saw this? The first time I saw this was May 7th. So depending on the date of the report, we can see that maybe this has been going on for a while, or hey, maybe this just started. Are there more impacted parties besides Claire and besides Sky? Also knowing that we need to provide those services to Claire and also to Sky to say, hey, what you're doing is very harmful. And how are we going to support both of you to prevent this behavior from happening again, and also make sure that we can provide those wraparound services to help you moving forward. I would like to now pass it over to Amanda to talk about integrating all of these things that we have learned through practice so that we can ensure that when those circumstances come up and we have those challenges, we have already thought about how to become an upstander. So thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Carissa. My name is Amanda Giguère, and I'm the Director of Outreach for the Colorado Shakespeare Festival. And I'd like to give a brief overview of one of the ways that we at the Colorado Shakespeare Festival have applied some of this violence prevention research into an arts-based education program for local schools in Colorado. So for the past 12 years, the Colorado Shakespeare Festival has partnered with the Center for the Study and Prevention of Violence on a Shakespeare and Violence Prevention School Tour, in which professional actors perform an abridged Shakespeare play on site at Colorado schools, followed then by interactive workshops in which the students then rehearse their own intervention strategies and practice the upstander behaviors that they want to see in the real world. So since 2011, we have reached over 130,000 students with this program, many of those within BVSD. And after experiencing a post-show workshop with our actors, between 85 and 90% of students say that they are likely to be upstanders. We also see an increase in Safe to Tell reports from the schools that we visit. So some of the questions we often get about this program are, why use theater to think about violence prevention? What do those two things have in common? And we actually see many overlaps between the goals of theater and the goals of violence prevention. So first of all, watching and making theater is one way to build our empathy muscles. So just like we put ourselves in the shoes of another person when we're in a play or watching a play, that kind of behavior is also really helpful in real life. That exercise in perspective taking can be one way to reduce violence. We also see that theater helps build connectedness. When you're working on a play, you're working as a team, and that kind of teamwork and collaboration can also be really helpful in violence prevention. We know from the research from the Center for the Study and Prevention of Violence that one of the key protective factors in violence prevention is, in fact, connectedness. Theater is also an art form that is rooted in change. The actors are transforming from one role to another. Characters in a play change from point A to point B. We also know that change is possible in real life. We know that violence is preventable. People can choose to change their behavior, and so we really emphasize that in these workshops. But finally, one of the things we find very meaningful about combining theater and violence prevention is this notion of practice or rehearsal. So as much as we all would probably like to say that we would stand up for someone when they're being mistreated, we would of course act as upstanders. The data suggests that we don't always do that. So in these post-show workshops with students, we give kids the chance to practice the kind of upstander strategies that we want them to try out in real life. So we practice all kinds of behavior in this world. We practice driving a car, we practice tying our shoes, we practice writing in cursive. Upstander behavior also takes practice. And in the theater, we practice before we ever go out in front of an audience. So we use that same model when we go into schools across Colorado and really get kids thinking about what kind of behaviors do we want to practice in the safety of our classroom before we need to put those strategies into practice. So let's all take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. You have heard a lot about violence prevention research during this presentation, and you may notice there's tension in your body. Just kind of give yourself a little shake. So we are going to think through a scenario that you might encounter. And we want you to think about what your strategy as an upstander might be in this situation. So as we go through this scenario, I want you to think about if this were something that were happening to you. First of all, what is concerning, if anything, about this situation? And second of all, what steps would you take as an upstander to address it? So the scenario is, during a basketball game at your child's school, you overhear two students in the bathroom say, "Carmen's always saying that she hates herself and that she wants to hurt herself, but I can never tell if she's serious or if she's just trying to get attention." So first of all, what is concerning about this situation, if anything? And then what steps would you take to address it? There are no right and wrong answers here. And if you're watching this video with someone else, we invite you to pause the video, take a moment to talk this over with the person you're with, or you can just write down some ideas and think through, what would my strategy be in this situation? So pause the video and come back when you're ready. Thank you for taking the time to think through some of these scenarios. We appreciate you coming up with some ideas, and we hope this was helpful in sort of thinking through what you might feel comfortable doing. The more we can practice our own upstander strategies, and the more we know what kind of words we might use, who we might go to for help, the more prepared we are when we actually need to use these strategies. And these are things that you can actually encourage kids to do as well. Practice what it might feel like to be an upstander when you see someone being mistreated on the playground. This is an important part of changing our culture from a culture of bystanders to a culture of upstanders. We know it takes practice. And remember, there are no perfect solutions. Nothing that you can say or do will stop all violence forever and always, but we can take small steps to think through, what is something I feel comfortable doing in this moment? Thank you.
So we thought it would be helpful to have a little discussion, a little debrief about what we've learned here in this presentation today. To start, let's talk a little bit about the case with Carmen, is there anything that you all would want to do or emphasize for parents and students in that case?
One of the things we often talk about is when we are practicing for being an upstander, putting yourself in the shoes of multiple different roles, right? Just like you would in a play. So you may take the perspective of not knowing who Carmen is and what would be the steps for an upstander reporting? Who would you go to and who would you tell? Or if you did know Carmen on a personal level and she was your child's friend or best friend, what type of role would you be playing as an upstander, and how would that reporting look different, if at all, right?
So, yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes having a personal connection to a situation, sometimes that makes it harder to take action, and sometimes it motivates us even further. If this were my kid, I would take action. I wonder also about, I mean, if I'm thinking if I were in that situation, and perhaps I didn't know Carmen or didn't know the kids who were talking, I might just try to connect with whoever I knew at the school, the principal, the counselor, the teacher, and just forward the information without maybe worrying too much about how to solve the problem. I think just getting the information out there. And this is something we talk with young kids about too, in terms of when to report. A lot of kids don't want to report things because they don't know how to fix the problem. And so we emphasize with kids, you don't have to know how to fix the problem. Your job is just to report, and when you share something to Safe to Tell, you're kind of giving it over to the professionals to figure out, is this something that needs to be addressed?
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the things we also discuss with a lot of our kids is understanding that when you are reporting, your role that you are serving is to provide supports, right? You are reporting because you want to help that person. You don't know what the outcome may be, right? We often, I think, get this perspective where kids are like, well, if I tell them, they might get in trouble. It's like, right, that may or may not happen, but what we know will happen is that those supports are going to be provided to that student or that individual, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, great points. Well, and I love too that you're recognizing that sometimes your relationship to the situation may make you feel differently for how you should intervene, or it may lead you to hesitate perhaps on intervening if you're not quite sure where you stand with that person. So your position in the situation may impact it, but we do want people to err on the side of sharing the information so that caring assistance can be provided. I think that's so helpful to be thinking about. Well, we also know that it's sometimes really difficult to see the warning signs, to recognize that some of the behaviors we talked about in the presentation, the unusual interest in weapons, the intense or escalating anger, are a little bit difficult to notice unfolding in an adolescent. Why do you think it is hard for us to see those warning signs unfolding?
I think it may be difficult to see those signs because we downplay a difference in signs, right? We say, oh, well, then maybe they're just having a bad day, or maybe they're going through something at home. And so I think when we recognize them and we state what they are, it gives more power to them, and that might be really scary, right? Like, oh, I saw that was concerning, I need to report it, versus that was concerning, but it's maybe they're just having a bad day, right? So I think that may be harder. It also may be hard because you have to intentionally, right, practice seeing what those signs are. And so sometimes it may be difficult because we're busy with other things that we may miss those signs. And I think, as Amanda stated, it takes really practice, not just for reporting, but actually observing what those are and knowing, right? And educating what those warning signs are. It may not be intense anger all the time. It may be the small things that eventually lead to intense anger, right? It may be, maybe they're becoming secluded from their friends, or maybe they're not doing the group activities that they used to do. Or maybe they're just being a little more short all the time towards something. Or maybe they're getting in trouble just a little bit for things, right? And boundary probing in areas that they didn't used to. And then those little things eventually become the warning signs that we observe on a big scale. So it's hard sometimes to recognize the little things as behavior that may not actually be normal to them because we downplay that.
And you make a good point too, that we're all so busy. We all get really distracted, and it's hard to focus on things outside of our own experience. And I think that's part of what, you know, a lot of this research is about, that learning to pay attention to what's going on around us, and especially knowing that it's so often peers who are privy to the warning signs, just really getting kids familiar with looking around and being aware of their what they're observing, and then kind of trusting your gut when you know something's off.
Yeah, that's a great point, that having that connection with people, recognizing when something doesn't feel right and not disregarding it as I'm overreacting, it's not really anything. That's actually an opportunity for early intervention, and it's the earlier interventions that can be even more powerful and successful than waiting until it's gone too far. Great points. Well, I know it's also really difficult for people to be upstanders. What are some of the reasons that you've heard people hesitate to come forward and share a concern when they see it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the age too, but with kids, a lot of it is, I don't want to be a snitch. I don't want to be a tattletale. And that speaks really to, Carissa, what you were saying about really thinking about reporting as helping, as opposed to, it's not about getting people in trouble, it's about helping. So they don't want to be seen as a snitch. And then sometimes, you know, a lot of times people don't help as they don't know the whole situation, and they're worried, maybe this is not my business, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I have some kind of flawed understanding of what's happening. And, you know, I think those are some of the concerns we hear. And then also not wanting to get hurt yourself. If someone's being mistreated, stepping up and saying, I think that's not okay, it kind of puts you right in the line of fire. And, you know, do you really want to put yourself on the spot? So emphasizing safety and keeping yourself safe is always really key with upstanders.
Yes, that's a great point. And it's also touching on the idea that you don't have to choose one way to be an upstander, that if you are worried about your own safety or perhaps retaliation from the person that you're reporting concerns about, then you could use one of those other 5 Ds for intervention. You could delay, you could delegate to another official, or document and through an email or a report to Safe to Tell. So that's a great point, that you also want to be keeping yourself safe in these situations. Is there anything else you'd want parents and students to think about to help keep their community safe?
I mean, I think we often tell the kids, first of all, talk to your parents about what you've learned about Safe to Tell, because I think having adults familiar, all adults should have Safe to Tell on their phone. They should have the app saved on their phone, and just kind of normalizing that as part of our culture. But that also we let kids know it's no less courageous to help anonymously, and just really normalizing that we're a culture that doesn't really like being vulnerable, and I think just recognizing sometimes we need help, and sometimes we need that help anonymously, and that's okay.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah, I think it is a wonderful thing when we're reading these Safe to Tell reports, and many students are like, I just feel like I need to tell somebody so that they can get help, right? So having those continued conversations, that Safe to Tell is such a wonderful outlet for that, because it is anonymous, and some of those reservations that we often have for upstander reporting can be void if we are using this anonymous report, right? And also having those conversations with your parents or a trusted adult to know that sometimes things are really hard and you may need to have somebody help you in helping make that decision.
Yeah, we also talk about Safe to Tell just as a safety net too, that the preference is for kids to go to their trusted adults. And actually when a Safe to Tell report goes in, it's going to the same people in the school who would be the people you go to anyways. So that's a good thing, I think, for families to emphasize with their kids, is talk to get help from your trusted adults. And if that is not available to you, then Safe to Tell can be a backup for that.
That's a great point. A trusted adult, first and foremost, if you're comfortable and if that's a possibility, and Safe to Tell is a great other avenue for reporting concerns, and you can do so anonymously. And as we see in Colorado, more than 20,000 tips are coming in each year on average, and that means that there are 20,000 people in our state that are providing the information that can help people who are in crisis. Yeah. We hope this information was helpful. Please reach out to us if you have any questions. My name is Sarah Goodrum.
I'm Carissa Jaquish.
And I'm Amanda Giguere.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.